So, lads, we watched the WNBA season this year, and we know that Caitlin Clark's whistle was a strange one. We know that she had a very, very strange whistle, and we know that the reality of the situation is that she got flagrantly fouled 5 or 6 times throughout the year. It should have been 10. It should have been 10. She got landing zone fouled at least 5 times that weren't called. She got the Kennedy Carter one that was called as a normal foul on the day. The eye poke, even if you believe it wasn't intentional, it's still a flagrant one. The Alyssa Thomas shoulder barge to the face. Like, there were a lot of blatant flagrants that weren't called. But now is a funny one because we're now seeing like the same WNBA media that were happy. Well, not even, I'm not going to say happy, but like, we're like, oh, these are normal fouls. This is just normal basketball. Now, when it happens in the NBA, making it a bigger deal. And this is where kind of the problem is that it was one rule for Caitlin and one rule for everybody else. And the one thing I will say is that, first of all, the Grant Williams thing, I'm actually think that it was a better call what happened in the WNBA. So if you guys didn't see, basically, the Caitlin Clark Diamond the Shields thing basically happened in the for the Celtics. Grant Williams did almost the same thing, except the thing is that the Diamond the Shields one is worse because she hits her in the back. She hits her in the back, dips her shoulder instead of just going from the side. But that was the, for lack of a better word, that was the Nikola Jokic. I say not the Nikola Jokic. That was what. So I can't remember what. There's been plenty of players that. But look, it's a flagrant one. Grant Hill was ejected for it. I still think that both were frustrated. Both were the exact same thing. Both were frustration fouls. Late in a game that you'd lost and against either a team or a player that you just wanted to hit. Like, it is what it is. And the thing is with the Caitlin Clark one is it literally came on the back of 3 potential flagrant fouls in a minute by Diamond Shields. First one, Caitlin Clark is running the break, and it's a blocking foul, but it's a hard foul. Like, it's a common foul, the first one, when Caitlin Clark's running in a straight line. She's running the break, and Diamond Shields sprints to get in front of her and just gets her body in front, just knocks her over. Like, that is that's one of those, like, hard, that's just a hard foul. But nowadays, it's probably a flagrant. And then just off the ball, Diamond Shields just hit Caitlin Clark 10 seconds later. And then 20 seconds later, this happened. So, like, Diamond Shields fouled her literally 3 times in 25 seconds. So, and all of them were intentional fouls. All of them were intentional fouls, excessive conduct. You could argue all 3 of them were flagrant ones. But at the same time, based on the NBA rules, this is an ejection. But the one thing is that I do think in isolation, this being a flagrant 1 is actually better than it being a flagrant 2. I don't think it should be worth an ejection. But at the same time, both were intentional. Both were on the break. Both basically blindsided their opponent. And if you guys don't remember what happened here, Caitlin Clark got up and sprinted away. She got up and sprinted away. And yeah, it was a bit of a weird one. It was a very, very weird one there when it comes to Caitlin Clark. But you're seeing here from, again, looking at Grant Williams' social media. Look, at the same time, I don't think any of this is right. But if that had happened, you'd be seeing it shared all over social media, especially with the Diamond the Shields one. People were like, oh, people wish she had. You saw the picture of somebody wishing she got her tumor back, and it's like, it was a OnlyFans bot. I'm not joking. It was, you guys have seen them on Instagram, the rage bait people, and you click onto them and they're advertising OnlyFans. It was one of those accounts. But this same person, and by the way, like, I have no issue with no, I think she does a pretty decent job, but like, I think it is fair to point out like some sort of hypocrisy, because at the end of the day, like, if we don't do that, like, at the end of the day, when you're in the position that like she's in, or even like myself are in, when you say something and you say something dumb, you should be held accountable for it. Like, for example, I'll always give myself, like, if somebody wants to call me out for the amount of stuff I said at the start of the year about how Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston will never work together, I'll admit it. I was wrong. I did not believe Aaliyah Boston had that ability to transition into that face-up, what could be like the first Jokic-type center in the WNBA. I didn't think she had it in her. She does. I was completely wrong. And like, you can look through all my thousands of videos and there are a whole bunch of things wrong that I've said and you can point out hypocrisy. And the reality is that you got to be able to take criticism. If you're going to give criticism, you got to be able to take it. And that's the thing where it's like, respect for Tatum walking away, truly a perplexing play. Jason Tatum's life is on the line each play. And likely results, it was just a regular shove. And the fact Caitlin Clark was about to score, if she wasn't stopped, her instinct was to reach towards it. It doesn't demonstrate any violent intent. So it's perplexing when he does it. It's, it's instinct when Diamond Shields does it. And then, by the way, was Carter right to shove Clark? Was the Shields? Probably not, but that's why referees blew the whistle. Basketball's a contact sport. And Kennedy Carter ran after Caitlin Clark, nowhere near the ball, shouted, you B word, and hip checked her. Like, come on. That is the most textbook ejection in the history of basketball. It is the most textbook ejection, and the referees on the floor called it a common foul. But then the reality is, like, she's literally writing articles about it. I'm scared to even wade into this discourse, but am I the only one who didn't think the Kennedy Carter foul was that egregious? Come on. If that happens in the NBA, like, Jokic got suspended for doing the same thing. People blame Jokic for ending Markieff Morris's career for doing exactly what Kennedy Carter did. And he did it out of retaliation. Kennedy Carter just called Caitlin Clark a B word and hit her. Like, it was a flagrant foul, sure, but dirty plays happen all the time in basketball. Why do we have a national discourse about it for 3 days? Do you want to know why there was a national discourse about it for 3 days? Because Caitlin Clark got punched 2 days earlier by Victoria Vivians. Simply put, 2 days earlier, Caitlin Clark got into it with Victoria Vivians. Victoria Vivians turned and clocked her. Like, we forget about the Vivians foul because Victoria Vivians is irrelevant. But 2 days earlier, Victoria Vivians clocked her, and Caitlin Clark got tossed to the ground about 5 times against Seattle. Every time she drove in, she got tossed to the ground. So there was already discourse about the referees the referees mistreating Caitlin, with how the other players were mistreating Caitlin. And then this is the narrative going into the Chicago game. And then in the Chicago game, Caitlin Clark gets cheap shotted. Angel Reese jumps up and celebrates. And then the referees go to the monitor and say common foul. That is why there was national discourse for 3 days. If the Seattle game hadn't happened a few days earlier, if the referees went to the monitor and said ejection, there's no national discourse for 3 days. It was the fact that there was already that narrative, people were targeting Caitlin. There was already the narrative, the referees were allowing them to rough up Caitlin. And then that happened. Because there is context to it. The vitriol the WNBA players like Diamond Shields and Kennedy Carter have faced for hard fouls by Caitlin Clark is racist and should be called out as such. No, it's not. No, it's not. The reality is that if Caitlin Clark, they didn't shut up for days about her hitting Jordan Canada in what was a basketball play. A flagrant one and a bad call by the referees called a common foul. It's basketball. It's sports. I'm sorry. Ryan Shawcross injured Aaron Ramsey. He got booed for how many years when he went to Arsenal? 2 white guys. Like, Stephen Hunt got booed a decade. Like, in 2006, he went to try win a ball. Petr Cech, the goalkeeper, dived on it. Stephen Hunt caught him in the head, broke his skull. Petr Cech made a full recovery. All was good. 6 years later, Ireland played the Czech Republic, and Stephen Hunt got booed every single time he touched the ball. 6 years later for a complete accident. I'm sorry, that's social media. It is. The reality is that we saw what happened with Grant Williams there. If you cheap shot a player on another team, fans of that team are going to attack you on social media. The reality, is it fair? Probably not. But to make it something that it's not, you've got to then escalate this every time. So every single time something happens, if you're going to escalate these situations and make this a bigger deal than it is, you've got to do it every single time. Because the reality is it a good reality of sports? Probably not. It's a problem with celebrity culture as much as anything. And it's a problem with the social media celebrity culture. People think they can say whatever they want to celebrities. And the reality is that in these apps, as much as we say people think they can say whatever they want, they realistically can. So the reality is that just if you're one of these WNBA players, turn your notifications off at the end of the day. But we've got to look at it both ways. Like the Diamond Shields situation, instead of looking at it and saying Diamond Shields a victim, the reality is that if you want to make something anti-Caitlin Clark, you got to look at why Diamond Shields is frustrated. Caitlin Clark had put up 30 on their heads Already at that point, I think she'd put up 29 points. She'd had 12 assists. And at that point in the game, she had hit the three in Cardoso's face, ran out and did her like jumpy celebration, looking like she was hurdling something. She had hyped up the crowd, being like, "Did that go in? Did that go in?" And she was basically hyping up your home crowd for her throughout that whole game. She basically spent that whole game being like, "Nah, this is my house. These fans, they're here for me." She basically spent the whole game doing that. And if you wanted to write a thing basically saying that Caitlin Clark basically that it was some sort of like not in our house type thing, which realistically probably what it was, because Diamond to Shields, again, like I've nothing against Diamond to Shields. It was a cheap shot in basketball. It happens. It happens. If you've played the sport and you've never been frustrated and felt some kind of frustration, you're lying. Like, it shouldn't have been made bigger than it is, but the problem is that it was made bigger than it is because of the media trying to say there's not people that aren't there for Caitlin Clark. They were. The WNBA players were. There's enough evidence to show that they were. Realistically, she was the most flagrantly fouled player in the league. She should have been flagrantly fouled twice as much. Like, off the top of my head, I can name the Victoria Vivian's punch, the Alyssa Thomas shot to the face, the Dejanay Carrington eye poke, even if it wasn't intentional and still flagrant, and at least 5 landing zone fouls that they just won't call on Caitlin Clark. Because, in fairness, I do think that's a hard one to call, because Caitlin Clark, when on her deep three, she comes forward so much that it is kind of a hard one to call. So, look, it is what it is. But at the end of the day, there were players that were targeting her, just like I think Alyssa Thomas targeted Angel Reese. Like, if you saw, like, Alyssa Thomas caught Angel Reese twice, and I think it's okay to say what we're seeing. I don't think there's any reason, because it seemed like there was something in the WNBA media that everyone had to report on every single thing the exact same way. And if you didn't report on something the exact same way, you were put in the same bracket as like Outkick or Whitlock. But the reality is that we all have 2 eyes. We all watch the games. We all saw that there were times where things were blown out of proportion. We also saw that there were times where she was very clearly targeted. We all saw that there were times where the referees didn't protect her. We saw there were times where Christy Sides didn't protect her. We saw there were times where she should have been teed up that she wasn't. We saw the de-escalation committee. We saw times where she was trying to stop Aaliyah Boston getting teed up. We all watched the games. We all watched what happened. And I think that was the biggest problem with the WNBA media, is there's people that clearly know basketball. There's people that clearly knew the league. And because there were a lot of bad things in the league before Caitlin Clark got there that became exposed because more people were watching for Caitlin Clark, that they went to defend every player not named Caitlin Clark for whatever reason possible, even when they were in the wrong. And I hope that's something that changes next year, that we can actually report on certain basketball topics when they're basketball topics. Like, the fact is that it got to the stage where even the Kennedy Carter Marina Mabry was the most obvious cheap shot of the season. First time Marina Mabry plays Chicago Sky, first possession on the floor, Kennedy Carter smacks her in the face. Like, there were articles saying that it wasn't even a foul. I'm like, no, she smacked her in the face. Her first possession on the floor, she got smacked in the face. Like, obviously intentional. But anyway, yeah, that's pretty much it. Was the Diamond to Shields thing that big a deal? No. Is this whole thing that big a deal? Not really. But I do think it's something that needs to be talked about, because at the end of the day, coming into next season, coming into college basketball, I think that you've got to... I think there has to be some consistency in what you're saying. Like, there are... A flagrant is a flagrant. It's no bigger than that. And I think trying to say that the Diamond to Shields foul was nothing, trying to make Diamond to Shields a victim, when the reality is that she went at Caitlin Clark 3 times in 90 seconds, and then trolls on social media went at her for doing that, when the reality is, in any other basketball league, in any other pro sports league in the world, like, if, for example, let's just say Messi comes on the pitch for Inter Miami, and I don't even watch the MLS, just an MLS defender goes and slide tackles him off the ball, no call. Slide tackles, or referee warns him. 5 seconds later, slide tackles him again, and then he's just running, and then a couple of seconds later runs in and just shoves him in the back. Like, that would be, and then gets himself sent off in 90 seconds for 3 nonsense stuff on Messi. that guy would be banned from the MLS. If it was very obvious, 3 off the ball, no need fouls to their cash cow, that player would be kicked out of the MLS. So I think there has to be some consistency with this, because you cannot make people like disagree with what their own eyes see. And I think that's what a lot of the media tried to do in defense of WNBA, but in reality, over like long term, not just on this season, over 5 or 6 years, all it's going to do is turn those fans off. If you're telling new fans that are just here to watch basketball that what you are seeing is wrong, that everything you know about basketball is wrong, that everything, like every reason you're here is wrong, that the player you're here to watch is actually not that good and she's not being targeted, and she's just soft, that's just going to turn off, long term, it's going to turn off more people and it's going to bring in. And I think that was the big flaw with the WNBA media, is that in fact I think the traditional media did such a bad job of actually reporting on the league, reporting on the games, and not making it like a Caitlin Bad situation. Whenever there was any sort of controversial situation, I think most of the time, obviously I think they did an okay job, but whenever there was any controversy, it was always not the side of Caitlin. Anytime it was a 50-50 or there was any like debate, it was never on the side of Caitlin from the media. And it from the outside looking in, it looked like there was almost you are not allowed to be positive towards Caitlin, which is why the likes of like myself did so well this year. And then on a bad note, the people that were significantly more extreme, and people that were more extreme, we know who they are. We know who they are. Like the people that didn't give a damn about basketball, but were just realistically just racists. They ended up getting a platform because that was, if you wanted to not hear Caitlin Bad, you realistically had to go to some of them, because the vast majority of people that were talking about it and that weren't in the Caitlin Bad at all costs, unfortunately, were racists. That was the unfortunate situation. So I think a big reason why the discourse was so bad was caused by the media telling people what their eyes were seeing was wrong. And yeah, rant over.